Alright, real quick, I don't want to leave this. In the last video, it seemed like I was leaving on a negative note. Well, when I meant, just forget this world, I meant the world of man, right? The world of, this dying civilization. Okay? You make your own world, which is not to say your own fantasy world. You know what I'm saying? So, but we'll go to a very grim man here, of course, the great Nathaniel Hawthorne. One of his stories sort of gives, I guess you could say, a little bit of hope. If it's only in hope, everything always returns to what we human beings are, for better or for worse. The whole question is: have they made the zombie nation? Right? Have they made, the civilization that cannot die and just continue on and on? I think that's impossible. How long that takes, does it matter for it to come back to the mean? So a little hope there. The idea of the human heart, which is the theme of a very interesting story he did, Earth's Holocaust. Oh, essentially, you could say it's a parable. It's sort of like an interesting, updated story of essentially humans, the Earth. People on Earth decided to throw all knowledge, all the things from the past, onto a great big bonfire and start from scratch. And the observer here is pretty much Hawthorne. The very funny part when they start throwing all the literature onto the fire, and how certain works, like the German stuff, there's brimstone. The British stuff is like good oak logs, and of course the popular stuff of the day, it goes with a whimper, right? When they poof and like nothing. Very, very funny, right? But I'm gonna get to. I can't read this whole thing; it's a little long. But I'll just read this part here. The end of it, the hope, the only chance for renewal, for hope, actually comes from the mouth of the antagonist. We'll go into this. In the last remnant of the literature of all the ages was now descending upon the blazing heap in the shape of a cloud of pamphlets from the press of the New World. These likewise were consumed in the twinkling of an eye, leaving the earth for the first time since the days of Cadmus, free from the plague of letters. An enviable field for the authors of the next generation. Well, and does anything remain to be done? Inquired I, somewhat anxiously. Unless we set fire to the earth itself, and then leap boldly off into infinite space, I know not that we can carry reform to any farther point. You are vastly mistaken, my good friend, said the observer. Believe me, the fire will not be allowed to settle down without the addition of fuel that will startle many persons who have lent a willing hand thus far. Nevertheless, there appeared to be a relaxation of effort for a little time, during which probably the leaders of the movement were considering what should be done next. In the interval, the philosopher threw his theory into the flames. A sacrifice which, by those who knew how to estimate it, was pronounced the most remarkable that had been yet made. The combustion, however, was by no means brilliant. Some indefatigable people, scorning to take a moment's ease, now employed themselves in collecting all the withered leaves and fallen boughs of the forest, and thereby recruited the bonfire to a greater height than ever. But this was mere by play. Here comes the fresh fuel that I spoke of, said my companion. To my astonishment, the persons who now advanced into the vacant space around the mountain fire bore surplices and other priestly garments, mitres, crosiers, and a confusion of popish and Protestant emblems, with which it seemed their purpose to consummate the great act of faith. Crosses from the spires of old cathedral were cast upon the heap with as little remorse as if the reverence of centuries, passing in long array beneath the lofty towers, had not looked up to them as the holiest of symbols. The fountain which infants were consecrated to God, the sacramental vessels whence piety received the hallowed draught, were given to the same destruction. Perhaps it most nearly touched my heart to see among these devoted relics fragments of the humble communion tables and undecorated pulpits, which I recognized as having been torn from the meeting houses of New England. Those simple edifices might have been permitted to retain all of their sacred embellishment that their Puritan founders had bestowed, even though the mighty structure of St. Peter's had sent its spoils to the fire of this terrible sacrifice. Yet I felt that these were but the externals of religion, and might most safely be relinquished by spirits that best knew their deep significance. All is well, said I cheerfully. The wood paths shall be the aisles of our cathedral, the firmament itself shall be its ceiling. What needs an earthly roof between the deity and his worshippers? Our faith can well afford to lose all the drapery that even the holiest men have thrown around it, and be the only more sublime in its simplicity. True, said my companion, but will they pause here? The doubt implied in his question was well-founded, and the general destruction of books already described. A holy volume that stood apart from the catalogue of human literature, and yet in one sense was that its head had been spared by the titan of innovation. Angel or fiend, double in his nature and capable of deeds befitting both characters. At first shaking down only the old and rotten shapes of things, had now, as it appeared, laid his terrible hand upon the main pillars which supported the whole edifice of our moral and spiritual state. The inhabitants of the earth had grown too enlightened to define their faith within a form of words, or to limit the spiritual by any analogy to our material existence. Truths which the heavens trembled at were now but a fable of the world's infancy. Therefore, as the final sacrifice of human error, what else remained to be thrown upon the embers of that awful pile except the book which, through a celestial revelation past ages, was but a voice from a lower sphere as regarded the present race of man? It was done. Upon the blazing heap of falsehood and worn-out truth, things that the earth had never needed, or had ceased to need, or had grown childishly weary of, fell the ponderous church Bible, the great old volume that had lain so long on the cushion of the pulpit, and whence the pastor's solemn voice had given holy utterance on so many a Sabbath day. There likewise fell the family Bible, which the long-buried patriarch had read to his children in prosperity or sorrow, by the fireside in the summer shade of trees, and had bequeathed downward as the heirloom of the generations. There fell the bosom Bible, the little volume that had been the soul's friend of some sorely tried child of dust, who thence took courage whether his trial were for life or death, steadfastly confronting both in the strong assurance of immortality. All these were flung into the fierce and riotous blaze, and then a mighty wind came roaring across the plain with a desolate howl, as if it were the angry lamentation of the earth for the loss of heaven's sunshine, and it shook the gigantic pyramid of flame and scattered the cinders of half-consumed abominations around upon the spectators. This is terrible, said I, feeling that my cheek grew pale and seeing a like change in the visages about me. Be of good courage yet, answered the man with whom I had so often spoken. He continued to gaze steadily at the spectacle with a singular calmness, as if it concerned him merely as an observer. Be of good courage, nor yet exult too much, for there is far less both of good and evil in the effect of this bonfire than the world might be willing to believe. How can that be? Exclaimed I impatiently. Has it not consumed everything? Has it not swallowed up or melted down every human or divine appendage of our mortal state that had substance enough to be acted on by fire? Will there be anything left us tomorrow morning, better or worse than a heap of embers and ashes? Surely there will, said my grave friend. Come hither tomorrow morning, or whenever the combustible portion of the pile shall be quite burned out, and you will find amongst the ashes everything really valuable that you have seen cast into the flames. Trust me, the world of tomorrow will again enrich itself with the gold and diamonds which have been cast off by the world of today. Not a truth is destroyed nor buried so deep among the ashes, but it will be raked up at last. This was a strange assurance, yet I felt inclined to credit it, the more especially as I beheld amongst the wallowing flames a copy of the Holy Scriptures, the pages of which, instead of being blackened into tinder, only assumed a more dazzling whiteness, as the finger marks of human imperfection were purified away. Certain marginal notes and commentaries, it is true, yielded to the intensity of the fiery test, but without detriment to the smallest syllable that had flamed from the pen of inspiration. Yes, there is the proof of what you say, answered I, turning to the observer, but if only what is evil can feel the action of the fire, then surely the conflagration has been of inestimable utility. Yet if I understand aright, you intimate a doubt whether the world's expectation of benefit would be realized by it. Listen to the talk of these worthies, he said, pointing to a group in front of the blazing pile. Possibly they may teach you something useful without intending it. The persons whom he indicated consist of that brutal and most earthly figure who stood first so furiously in defense of the gallows, the hangman, in short, together with the last thief and the last murderer, all three of whom were clustered about the last toper. The latter was liberally passing the brandy bottle which he had rescued from the general destruction of wines and spirits. Oh my God. This little convivial party seemed at the lowest pitch of despondency, as considering that the purified world must needs be utterly unlike the sphere that they had hitherto known, and therefore but a strange and desolate abode for gentlemen of their kidney. The best counsel for all of us, remarked the hangman, that as soon as we have finished this last drop of liquor, I help you, my 3 friends, to a comfortable end upon this nearest tree, and then hang myself on the same bough. This is no world for us any longer. Po, po, my good fellows, said a dark-complexioned personage, who now joined the group. His complexion was indeed fearfully dark, and his eyes glowed with a redder light than that of the bonfire. Be not so cast down, my dear friends. You shall see good days yet. There's one thing that these wiseacres have forgotten to throw into the fire, and without which all the rest of the conflagration is just nothing at all. Yes, though they had burned the earth itself to a cinder. But what may that be? Eagerly demanded the last murderer. What but the human heart itself? Said the dark-visaged stranger with a portentous grin. And unless they hit upon some method of purifying that foul cavern, forth from it will reissue all the shapes of wrong and misery, the same old shapes or worse ones, which they have taken such a vast deal of trouble to consume to ashes. I have stood by this livelong night and laughed on my sleeve at the whole business. Oh, take my word for it. It will be the old world yet. This brief conversation supplied me with a theme for lengthened thought. How sad a truth, if true it were, that man's age-long endeavor for perfection has served only to render him the mockery of the evil principle, from the fatal circumstance of an error at the very root of the matter. The heart, there was little, yet boundless spheres wherein existed the original wrong, of which the crime and misery of this outward world were merely types. Purify that inward sphere, and the many shapes of evil that haunt the outward, and which now seem almost our only realities, will turn to shadowy phantoms and vanish of their own accord. But if we go no deeper than the intellect, and strive with merely that feeble instrument to discern and rectify what is wrong, our whole accomplishment will be but a dream, so unsubstantial that it matters little whether the bound fire which I have so faithfully described were what we chose to call a real event, and a flame that could scorch the finger, or only a phosphoric radiance, and a parable of my own brain. What a great story, man. It will be the old world yet. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne.